My father told me I was a disappointment, right in front of everyone, then toasted my brother like I never existed. And the worst part, I didn't even flinch. I had rehearsed this pain so many times in my head, it almost felt polite. But that night, something inside me cracked. Not with anger, with clarity. You can only be invisible for so long before you start questioning if you were ever real to begin with. Before I share my story, I want to know you are here with me. Just say listening in the comments, or let me know where you are. I love hearing how far my story reached. Sometimes, even the smallest connection can make a story feel heard. Thank you. And now, here's my story. My name is Lucas Manning. I'm 33, a financial strategist in New York, and for reasons I still can't quite explain, I found myself back in my parents' home outside Philadelphia. Not because I missed it, not because I wanted to be there, but because of an envelope that had been weighing down my coat pocket for the past 3 months. It was my father's birthday. Victor Manning, founder of the Manning Group, a man whose legacy was measured not in affection, but in assets. His birthday parties were less celebration and more spectacle. Polished, cold affairs lined with tailored suits and practiced smiles. The kind of night where everyone played their part at a table long enough to seat power, but never warmth. I wasn't there for the cake or the clinking of crystal. I wasn't there to play the prodigal son. I was there because something inside me needed an answer. And that answer might be sealed inside the envelope, cutting into my ribs as I sat at the far end of the table, a ghost in my own lineage. Everyone had a place in this family portrait. Everyone but me. Grant, the oldest, broad-shouldered, polished, unshakably competent. The kind of man who made decisions with the same ease he shook hands. He ran the Boston branch of the family's real estate empire, and was frequently referred to by my father as the future of the Manning name. May, the youngest, bright-eyed, effortlessly social, the peacemaker. She had a way of making everyone feel seen, heard, appreciated. Even my father admired her, which said a lot. And then there was me, the middle one, the one with degrees from Columbia and a career managing assets bigger than our entire family portfolio. And yet, still, just Lucas. The one no one introduced. The one whose name hung in the air but never landed. To my father, I was the city boy who chose piano over baseball, finance over family, and independence over inheritance. A misfit draped in expensive wool, tolerated at best, invisible at worst. Dinner was halfway done when my father stood, wineglass in hand. His voice was clear, confident, commanding. "I'm proud of my children," he said. "Each one of them carries forward the legacy of this family." He turned to Grant first, pride nearly vibrating off his chest. Then to May, eyes softening. Words of affirmation spilled effortlessly, like oil on glass. And then, his gaze swept toward me. He paused, smiled faintly, and drank. No words, no name, just a shift in subject, as though I were an afterthought best left unspoken. That silence was louder than anything else I'd ever heard. I gripped my wineglass so tightly it creaked in my hand. The envelope in my coat pocket pressed against my ribs like a thorn. It wasn't just paper inside. It was the culmination of every unanswered question I had ever asked myself. A DNA test I'd taken months ago after a strange phone call from a stranger with too much knowledge and too little explanation. I hadn't opened it yet. Maybe because part of me feared the answer. Maybe because another part already knew. I stood, slowly. No one noticed. No one called my name. Not even May. Behind me, the clinking of glasses and polite laughter continued like background music. And my father's eyes never even flicked toward the empty chair I'd left behind. I don't remember exactly when I realized I wasn't liked. Not just disliked, but unwanted, unnecessary. Maybe it was the Sunday when Grant got to go with Dad to the Eagles game, and I was left behind with Mrs. Perkins, the housekeeper. Or maybe it was when I started playing piano, and my father said, "Real men don't sit behind keyboards unless they're coding or trading." He never hit me. He never yelled. But everything about his silence screamed, "You're not what I ordered." I remember the only time he came to one of my milestones, my high school graduation. I was wearing the rented cap and gown, shaking hands with the principal, smiling like it mattered. Afterward, he pulled me aside and said, Take that thing off. It's just a private school. Don't parade around like it's something to brag about. I took it off, quietly, but something cracked inside me that day, and it never healed right. One afternoon, not long after I'd started college, I overheard a conversation between my mother and my aunt. They didn't know I was there. "It's not Lucas's fault," my mother whispered. "It's the past's." My stomach twisted. Later, I asked her what she meant. She smiled, placed a gentle hand on mine, and said, "You think too much. We were just reminiscing." But her smile never touched her eyes, and her hand, though warm, never held mine tightly. Since then, the questions never stopped. Was I a mistake? Was I an echo of something no one wanted to remember? My mother, Angela, was always soft-spoken. She never raised her voice. She made banana bread when I cried, and pressed her palm to my back when I came home late. But she never stood up for me. Not once. Not when my father dismissed me. Not when he excluded me. She was the kind of mother who would place her hand on your shoulder just before you fell, but never pull you back. Over time, I stopped expecting the fall to be caught. And yet, she was the only person I still visited when I came home, because even a soft ghost is better than no one at all. So, no, my father didn't need to say, "I don't love you." He never had to, because he never once gave me a reason to believe otherwise. And that envelope, it's still in my coat pocket. A silent witness, a possible sentence. I haven't opened it, but I know, I feel it in my bones, that the time is coming. There was a time, not too long ago, when I thought I might finally be seen, maybe even accepted. I had just been promoted to lead financial analyst at a top-tier firm in New York. 7 years of grinding, proving myself to people who never knew my name and didn't care about my pedigree, only results. And I delivered. And when I did, I bought a car. Not just any car, a black SUV, the exact make and model my father once called a real man's car. I had it shipped to the house in Philadelphia, included a small card, just one line. "I hope this makes you proud." A week passed, nothing. No message, no call, not even a nod through May. Silence. Then my mother texted me. "Your father put the car in the garage. He said, well, it's nice enough." That was it. I swallowed the sting, told myself silence was better than rejection. At least he didn't return it. At least he kept it. That counted for something, didn't it? But the illusion didn't last long. A few weekends later, I visited home, unannounced. I walked through the backyard and heard my father laughing with a few of his old business buddies. Scotch in hand, posture relaxed, like he actually enjoyed being alive. Someone pointed to the SUV parked outside the garage. My father chuckled. "Oh, that? A gift from one of our partners. Guess they're trying to sweeten the next round of talks." He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He wore the lie like a favorite tie, not even a passing mention that it came from his son. I didn't step in. I didn't say a word. I just stood behind the hedge like a stranger eavesdropping on a life I wasn't welcome in. Later that night, May tried to defend him. "He's not great at expressing things," she said. "But I swear he liked it. He just doesn't know how to show it." But that wasn't true. I'd seen him express pride, love, joy, all of it. Just never for me. And I was starting to understand why. It started with a curiosity, nothing more. A trend in our industry. Ancestry kits, DNA tests, genetic heritage breakdowns. I sent one in, thinking I'd learned something about where my bloodline came from. When the results arrived weeks later, I saw a sentence that changed everything. No direct paternal match found with the listed father. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I just stared at the screen as the walls of my life quietly rearranged themselves. I didn't tell anyone. But the seed of doubt had sprouted, and it kept growing, wrapping around every memory I thought I understood. So, one afternoon, I went back home, slipped into the upstairs bathroom, found my father's brush, pulled a few hairs, wrapped them in a paper towel, and left. I sent them to a private lab in Manhattan. 3 days before his birthday, the envelope arrived. Thick, heavy. I haven't opened it. It's on my desk now, beside a pen I haven't touched, and a photo of my college graduation that he never attended. That car, that gesture of gratitude, that silent, "Do you see me now?" had become just another prop in his story. A convenient lie to keep up appearances. And for the first time, I didn't just feel hurt. I felt used, not rejected, repurposed. I left the party like someone stepping out of a burning building. No urgency, no panic, just that quiet, numb kind of exit. When you finally accept that nothing in there is worth salvaging. The hotel room was dimly lit, neat, impersonal. The envelope lay on the desk like it had been waiting. I sat across from it, the air thick with something I couldn't name. If he's not my father, I whispered to no one, then who am I in this family? Memories don't hit all at once. They creep in like water under a door. The time he called Grant, the one who'll carry the name, and told me I should learn to cook so I wouldn't starve. The day I brought home a state-level economics award and he said, "Data doesn't speak truth. It just reflects noise." I used to think he was just tough. Now I knew better. I hadn't been growing. I'd been proving. Every certificate, every promotion, every carefully measured success, it wasn't for me. It was for him. Or rather, for the version of me I thought might finally earn his nod. It wasn't growth. It was penance. That night, I picked up the phone and called my mother. I don't know why. Maybe I just wanted to hear someone breathe on the other end. She answered on the third ring. Her voice was tired, soft. "Mom," I asked, "have you ever, even once, felt like I didn't belong in that house?" Silence. A long pause. Then, finally, she said, "Lucas, there are things I can't say aloud in that house. But you were never a mistake." She didn't elaborate. She didn't need to. I sat in the dark, phone against my cheek, and felt my pulse echo in my throat. The next morning, I drove back to the house. Mom had asked me to pick up some old paperwork from the study. The SUV sat in the driveway, clean, polished, pristine. An elderly neighbor walking his dog passed by and gave me a friendly nod. "Victor's new ride, huh? Heard a business partner gave it to him. Fancy folks like him, they get all the perks." I didn't reply, just smiled faintly. My tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, holding back whatever it was that wanted to come out. Later I found May in the kitchen. She was peeling apples, like she always did when she was avoiding something. "I heard what he said," I told her. She flinched. "He didn't mean anything by it," she murmured. "It's just easier for him to explain it that way. You know how Dad is." "No," I said. "I really don't. Because this wasn't about emotional restraint anymore. This was deliberate, calculated, erasure." As I walked past his office, I heard his voice through the slightly open door. "Lucas," he said into the phone. "He doesn't understand what real value is. That boy lives to prove himself, not to build anything lasting." It was the kind of sentence that feels almost small when you hear it, but it slices clean through your skin. He didn't say, "my son." He said, "that boy." It hit me harder than I expected. I left the house with nothing in my hands. Nothing except a truth I hadn't been ready to admit. Maybe I didn't need to open the envelope. Because sometimes, when someone has already decided you're not family, the blood you share or don't stops mattering. I sat by the hotel window alone, the envelope in my hand now worn at the corners. 3 days. That's how long it had been since it arrived. I'd held it every night, turned it over, memorized the weight of it. I hadn't opened it, not because I was afraid of what it might say, but because somehow I already knew. This wasn't proof anymore. It was release. And yet, I kept hesitating, like some part of me still needed someone else to say it first. What haunted me wasn't the test result itself. It was the possibility that Victor Manning, my father legally, might have known all along. If he did, then everything made a cruel kind of sense. The coldness, the dismissals, the strategic silence, the way he looked past me like I was a shadow that kept getting in the way of his light. I thought back to all the times he could have said something, anything, that resembled affection. He never did, not once. And if he'd known from the start that I wasn't his, then none of it had been accidental. It hadn't been indifference. It had been a choice. And I was the casualty of that choice. I needed to talk to someone. I called Grant. We met at his office. Glass walls, leather chairs, the scent of expensive cologne, and success. He sat across from me, hands folded, waiting. I danced around the question until I finally asked, "Did you ever notice anything off about the way Dad treated me?" Grant didn't blink. "You don't fit his mold, Lucas. That's it. You chose a different life. It's not personal. It's practical." His tone was clipped, professional, like he was analyzing a stock portfolio, not his own brother's emotional scars. I stood to leave, but as I reached the door, he added, without turning around, "If you're thinking of doing something reckless at the party this weekend, just remember, not everyone's ready for the truth." That stopped me cold. It wasn't advice. It was a warning. That night, back at the hotel, I sat with that thought. The truth. What would it change? Who would it hurt? And why did a part of me still want to shout it from the rooftop? Then there was a knock at the door. It was May. She looked pale, nervous. She held something in her hand. A small envelope, yellowed with time. "I wasn't supposed to find this," she said. "But I did. A few years ago, when I helped Mom clean out the attic." She handed it to me without another word. It was a letter dated 33 years ago, from a man named Robert Ellis. The handwriting was careful, emotional. I unfolded it slowly. "If you are pregnant, I will take responsibility. Even if we can't be together, I want you to know I'll do what I can. Just don't let the boy grow up thinking he doesn't belong." Ohio State, Engineering Department. The timeline lined up exactly with the months before I was born. I stared at the paper as if it might suddenly rewrite itself. It didn't. It just sat there, raw and undeniable. I didn't cry, I didn't shout, I just felt still. Not broken, not even betrayed. Just confirmed. I looked out the window again, but the city didn't look the same anymore. The lights were colder, the streets more distant. I had always thought I was the family's failure, the disappointment, but I was never a failure. I was a deletion, a mistake someone tried to erase without making a sound. Victor didn't just tolerate me. He eliminated me, inch by inch, from every family memory he could control. Not by saying I didn't belong, but by never saying I did. And now I knew. I didn't need DNA results to tell me anymore. I had the letter. I had the years of silence. And I had a father, just not the one I grew up with, but most of all, I had the truth. And sometimes, that's heavier than any lie. 2 days before the big party, I sat in a quiet corner of a small cafe in Philadelphia, the kind of place where time feels slower, and memories find you whether you want them to or not. My coffee had gone cold. I wasn't drinking it, just holding it, like a prop in a scene I'd played too many times. I kept thinking back to a family meeting 10 years ago. We were all gathered in the grand dining room of the Manning estate. The air was thick with pride and expectation. That was the day Victor Manning, my father, stood up before everyone and made his declaration. When I turn 65, the entire Manning Corporation will be transferred to Grant. Applause erupted. May smiled politely. Grant looked humbled, but triumphant. And me? I was at the peak of my career then, freshly featured in the Wall Street Journal for a piece on emerging financial strategies. And yet, I wasn't mentioned. Not even in passing. Like I didn't exist. That memory felt sharper than ever now. Later that day, I went to visit Mr. Harris, our family's longtime attorney. A stoic man with decades behind him, he had handled every contract, every trust, every secret. I asked him directly about the will, about my place in it. He didn't answer. Not really. Instead, as I stood to leave, he simply said, "Some things are written not to be fair, but to preserve order." Those words stayed with me. Order. That was what the Manning name had always been about. Status, image, legacy, and I had never fit into that neatly ironed idea of order. That night, May called. She asked me to meet her outside the house. Her face was pale, eyes tired. She took a long breath before saying what she had kept for too long. "There's something you should know. When Mom got pregnant with you, Dad told her to terminate." I didn't say a word. She refused. He never hit her, never screamed. But from that day on, the silence began. and it never ended. I felt like the air around me had collapsed. Every cold glance, every passive dismissal, every moment I thought I wasn't enough. It had never been about my grades, my career, or my attitude. It had been about my existence. I was allowed to live, but not allowed to belong. Every time he looked at me, he didn't see a sun. He saw a deviation, a threat to the narrative he'd built. The next morning, I opened my laptop, and there it was, an email from an unfamiliar address, Robert Ellis. The subject line was simple, "If you want to meet." The body of the message was even simpler. "Lucas, I don't want to intrude on your life. If you'd ever like to talk, I'm willing to come to New York next week, but I understand if you don't. I just wanted to offer you the choice. No grand declarations, no attempts at emotional redemption, just respect." A tone I had never received from the man who raised me. And that was what broke me the most. I didn't know which part hurt more. That a stranger could write me with more kindness than my own father had managed in 33 years. Or that everything I'd fought so hard to preserve, the name, the legacy, the illusion, had never included me to begin with. I had been defending a kingdom that never considered me royalty. I looked at the letter from Robert again, then at the DNA report, then at the old letter May had given me. Each one was a blade, slicing away the version of myself I'd worked so hard to hold together. There was no room left for doubt. The only question now was, what was I going to do at that party? In front of the family who had always treated me like a ghost in their photographs? Would I stay silent? Or would I finally make myself seen, knowing full well there would be no going back? Whatever choice I made, it would define everything that came next. I came back to the house the night before the party. The kitchen still looked like it did when I was a kid. Same wooden cabinets, same yellow tiles. But the dining table had grown longer, colder. The five of us sat apart, with 33 years of silence stretched between every chair. Dinner started with the usual formalities. Dad asked Gran about his recent acquisition in Chicago, then turned to May and inquired about her charity fundraiser. His voice was warm, familiar, the way it always was with them. Then he turned to me. The smile didn't reach his eyes. "So, is Wall Street still selling dreams dressed as numbers?" I smiled back, tight-lipped. That was his favorite dig. Ever since I first got into finance, he called it bubble blowing for smartasses. It used to sting. Now, it just echoed. Then something unexpected happened. Mom spoke. "Lucas was just appointed to the Strategic Advisory Board at Morgan Lincoln," she said, voice steady. "He's the youngest member they've ever had." The room fell silent for a beat. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I could feel Dad's eyes, feel them calculating, deciding how to spin this. He set down his utensils, gave a short nod, and muttered, "They'll let anyone in these days if they're trying to meet a diversity quota." Just like that, I felt myself disappear from the table. After dinner, I stepped out into the garden. The sky was bruised with clouds. Dad stood by the old fountain, holding a glass of wine. I approached him, no longer needing to pretend. "You knew I wasn't your biological son, didn't you?" He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just said, "I gave you my name." That's more than most would. Then he added, slow and deliberate, "If you plan to ruin tomorrow's party, know this, you won't just lose your father, you'll lose your name." My throat burned. Still, I asked him the one question that had haunted me my entire life. "Then what were you trying to teach me all these years?" His eyes darkened. "That there are things in life you can't change, no matter how hard you try." Back at the hotel, I sat by the window and opened Robert Ellis's email again. My fingers hovered over the keys. Then, slowly, I typed, "I'm not ready to meet yet, but thank you. At least you never treated me like a mistake." I didn't cry, but something in me shifted. A quiet goodbye, not to a man, but to a hope I'd held onto for far too long. The next morning, I arrived at the estate in a tailored black suit. Guests flooded the grounds, laughter and champagne filling the air. I stood at the edge, unnoticed. A few people glanced my way, polite nods at best. Most assumed I was one of the event staff. The backyard was decked in white and gold. Banners hung across the pergola, celebrating 65 years, honoring the founder. It felt like stepping into a museum built for someone else's memory. I saw Dad rehearsing at the podium, adjusting the mic. A thick speech script lay beside him. Grant and May moved gracefully through the crowd, shaking hands, smiling. No one mentioned me. No one asked where I'd been. Behind a curtain near the stage, I stood alone with 2 papers in my pocket, the DNA results, and Robert Ellis's letter. Both heavy, both sharp. Then, the applause began. Dad took the stage. He spoke about legacy, about vision, about building something that would outlive him. And then he paused, smiled, and said, This is my son, Grant Manning, the man who will carry our family name forward." Grant walked up. They hugged. Cameras flashed, people clapped, and I stood there, not even a footnote in the story. My hand gripped the envelope in my pocket. This was my moment. I could walk up, take the mic, say everything. The truth, finally spoken aloud. I took 1 step forward. Grant looked at me. Just one glance. No anger, no fear, just a quiet warning. "Don't do this." And in my head, Dad's voice whispered again, "There are things in life you can't change." I stepped back. I left the party unnoticed. No one called after me. At the hotel, I peeled off the name tag from my lapel. Lucas Manning. I dropped it into the trash. Then I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Mr. Harris. I won't be pursuing any inheritance. The thing I wanted from this family was never theirs to give. I signed it with my real name, for the first time, Lucas Ellis. A week had passed since the party. I was back in New York. There was no rage, no tears, just a hollow quiet that followed me everywhere. People think that speaking the truth is supposed to feel like a release, but sometimes all it leaves behind are broken pieces nobody wants to pick up. Then the phone rang. It was my mother. She didn't apologize, didn't defend herself or my father. She just said, "Lucas, can you come home? Not to talk to your dad, just me." I agreed, but I didn't step foot in the main house. We met at the old bakery on 8th and Maple, where she used to take me after every school exam. She looked older, not in the way of wrinkles, but in the way she carried silence. She told me that the day she found out she was pregnant with me, she stood by the lake for nearly 2 hours. Not because she wanted to jump, but because she didn't know if I deserved to be born into this. And for the first time in my life, she cried. Not as my mother, not as someone's wife, but as a woman who once made a choice that cost her everything. That night, I returned to my apartment. There was a letter waiting from Robert Ellis, handwritten, no flowery language, no demands, just one line that stuck with me. "Lucas, you don't have to forgive anyone, but don't let them teach you how to carry pain." I folded the letter and sat in silence. I couldn't tell if I felt lighter or just undone. He wasn't trying to save me. He was giving me permission to stop pretending I didn't bleed. A few days later, I visited my grandfather's grave. I didn't expect to see anyone there, but Grant and May were standing by the headstone. May looked uneasy. She approached me, eyes lowered. "I'm sorry for keeping that letter. I was scared. I thought if you knew, you'd leave. For good." Grant said nothing. He simply reached into his coat pocket and handed me a key. No words, just the weight of it in my hand. It was for one of our father's private storage rooms. Inside, I found boxes of old files, mostly business, but in the corner, an envelope marked personal. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. None ever sent. One, half finished, read, "If I die before I can fix what I've done, I hope Lucas understands. I was more of a coward than a bad father." I sat on the floor for hours, the envelope in my lap. No apology could change what had been lost, but cowardice, in its own way, is a confession. It means he knew. He just wasn't brave enough to face it. It was a crisp fall morning when I decided to drive to Ohio. The leaves were beginning to turn, and the sky had that pale blue stretch that made everything feel quieter. I wasn't looking for a father. I just wanted to know I hadn't begun my life as someone's denial. In my coat pocket was a letter I'd once written to Victor. Never sent. It had one line. "You had a choice. You didn't choose me." Halfway to Columbus, I stopped at a rest area, lit the letter on fire under a maple tree, and watched it curl into nothing. I didn't need him to choose me anymore. I had already chosen myself. Before arriving, I detoured past my old high school. The place still smelled of old textbooks and polished linoleum. Mrs. Kellerman, my literature teacher, was walking toward the front door when she saw me. She smiled. "You've always reminded me of your mother more than anyone." It was such a simple thing to say, but it hit somewhere deep. All my life, I thought I didn't fit. Maybe I was just planted in the wrong soil. Eventually, I pulled up to a small wooden house nestled behind rows of red maples. I didn't knock right away, just stood there, breathing. Then the door opened. Robert Ellis looked exactly how I imagined, gray-haired, kind-eyed, and calm. "You want coffee?" he asked. I brew it strong. No embrace, no awkward explanations, no talk of DNA. We sat by the window, two strangers, two men, watching the world go by through steam-fogged glass. No one tried to fix anything. A few days later, I was back in New York. On my desk sat a digitally rendered photo, a boy, me, sitting in my mother's lap, laughing. A moment I never had, now imagined into existence. I opened my personal podcast recorder and hit record. If you've ever wondered whether you're worthy of love, let me tell you this. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need a bloodline. You don't even need a name. You just need to believe that you matter. And then, write your own story. I paused. Then I ended the recording. No longer Lucas Manning. Just Lucas. That's all I have for now. Thank you for staying with me through every word, every pause, and every moment of silence I've carried for years. If you've ever felt like love came with conditions, or that your worth had to be proven just to be seen, if you've ever stood in a room full of people and still felt invisible, or maybe you haven't lived it, but you understand it, you've witnessed it, or your heart simply knows how this pain might feel, just comment yes below. Sometimes that's all it takes to say, I hear you, I've been there, you're not alone. And if you feel like sharing your own story, please do, or just sit with mine. Both are more than enough. I'll be here, and so will others, because in this little corner of the world, maybe our stories broken, quiet, unfinished, finally have a place to belong. Until next time, take care of yourself, and don't forget healing doesn't always look loud, but it always begins with listening.